Today is June the 24th, 2023. And the reason that that date is important is that this may be the day and yesterday of the reporting of what's transpiring right now inside Russia with Prigozhin and the possibility of a coup that has been bruited about by the mass media in the past nearly 2 days now. That's sort of been quelled at this point because it looks like it's totally fizzled. But this may have knocked some cobwebs out of the public in terms of intervening on their otherwise virtual reality. For those that are capable of thinking about what's taking place in the world, at least, and maybe are somewhat avoiding it as really nothing, due to the belief that they're too small, that they are not capable of affecting any real change on the planet. So, at any rate, in the last couple hours, I've written a number of items. And I'm just going to go through and pretty much read them for the rest of this video. It's going to be a short one, but that's what I'm going to do. If I think of another comment while I'm reading them, of course, I'll add that. So first of all, I'm going to go to my Twitter page because I've got 3 avenues that I really use to get ideas out. And one of the avenues is Twitter. And I'm going to read there a number of posts that I've made. The first says, most recent, I was responding to another post that says PSYOPers need to explain this narrative to dead Russian airmen who missed the memo on this grand game of 4D chess. And what I said is, the problem is that the war planners themselves are playing a geopolitical game in the first place. And I'm going to go on to talk more about what I've written today about geopolitics and connected considerations. I made a comment on another posting that the guise of objectivity in reporting in the midst of so much psychological operations, warfare going on, is generally the ruse of small and corrupted minds. Quote, objectivity. Because what does it mean? Objective according to whose opinion? What's objective? Facts, facts, facts. Well, facts in the middle of the fog of war are pretty hard to come by. You can make conjectures, but you can't spell out the outcome of something because of the possible twists and turns. And that's another thing I've recently wrote about, is that the problem of geopolitics is that the only way out is ending geopolitics, abandoning it entirely. It's a Hobbesian nightmare. The philosopher Hobbes is the best expression of what's wrong with geopolitics, because his assumption says we are in a war of each against all. Now, if you base a government on the idea that we are in a war of each against all, invariably, that's going to mean real war, not just literary war, or war over nonsense. It means war. So what is the basis of that doctrine, of that false geopolitical doctrine? That every one of us is at some level a brute beast, and that we cannot overcome, humanity cannot overcome those kinds of flaws that are inherent to our nature. But is that our nature? That's the question, really. What is the alternative to Hobbesian war of each against all? Well, right now, it's to stop provoking wars. Now, how do we provoke wars? Let's take an example of what's going on with China right now. The idea that China caused a pandemic, has concentration camps for Uyghurs, and steals all the Western intellectual property are all justifications, whether you know it or not. You may not know it. You may buy into this, but it is a justification for war, to military intervention to stop these hideous evils. Consider the fact that our current allies, Japan and Germany, carried much worse atrocities than even anything China is currently being charged with, even if it were all true. I mean, I'm not saying that Uyghurs are being put into concentration camps and gassed. That I don't see. Who's charging that? No, they're saying they're being re-educated. Okay, so re-education camps, it doesn't sound good, but come on. The United States put Japanese Americans in prisons. But let's also look at who these allies right now, what did they do in World War II? What atrocities did they carry out? Well, Japan, one of the worst things, really, in my way of thinking, was this sex slavery from places like Korea. Of course, much more hideous than even that was the mass extermination camps of the Nazis. So those are now our allies. So what happened? We defeated them, and we said, we're going to replace your ideology with our ideology. But what is the ideology? What's behind the words that we hear time and time again as justifications right now for our policies? Well, it's the rules-based order. At the level of the monetary affairs of nations, what does that rules-based order mean? Well, it means the dollar is a unipolar hegemon on the planet due to the use of the lingua franca, so to speak, as a currency of the dollar worldwide. That is, if you want to exploit financial control to your benefit, it's a world, again, going back to this Hobbesian idea. What's the idea in a Hobbesian world of monetarism? Because that's what monetarism is run along the same framework, the same assumptions of a Hobbesian war of each against all. Because what are you doing by making money, for example, by betting on companies that loot our productive economy? It's no secret. When you move productive facilities outside the United States for cheap labor, you're in a race for the bottom. What do you have left in this country right now? People getting college degrees, forever indebted, that are going to not be able to ever pay it back. They're become debt slaves, really. There's a class of debt slaves. It's not indentured servants. It's modern. It's debt slavery. So that's the kind of, again, who's in control here? Why is it that we should have debt slaves that don't have control over their own future, their own possibilities? Why should that happen? Why should that even be possible? Now, what's the way out? What's the way out of that debt slavery? All right, well, first of all, it amounts to writing off bad debt. Writing it off and replacing it, not just willy-nilly saying that let's have Jubilee, debt forgiveness as a one-time, a resetting of the economy, because that doesn't do away with the previous mentality. We saw that, for example, take a look at what happened with the Soviet Union. With Yeltsin, what happened? People in the Russia in particular were given shares of all different previously state-owned entities. And what happened? Carpetbaggers came in to buy up the shares and consolidate them. And again, looting of the economy. Oh, they'll say, oh, efficiency. Oh, we were going for efficiency. That's a ruse. That's a false narrative. They were going to loot it. This is like the carpetbaggers that came in after the Civil War. We all know that story here. It's in the history books. There's no controversy about it whatsoever. But there would be controversy that right now you're talking about, and there is controversy about how our system of financial manipulations has become a mechanism for looting the labor of the world. That's what threw a monkey wrench into it? China. Because the idea was, we'll keep these countries that are satraps of our financial system, providing the cheap labor. That is what China why they threw a monkey wrench. Because what did they do? Instead of just becoming a zone of cheap labor, they said, no. We're going to have a productive economy that's going to increase the internal well-being of our populations. And one thing to understand about that, this is not, you have to look at China in terms of their movement from hideous philosophies that were totally wrong-headed and just in certain cases it's extreme stuff, existential philosophy essentially. For example, the idea that intellectuals are evil. Where is that coming from? Intellectuals are evil? So if you wear glasses in Cambodia, well, first of all, in Mao, you go to the work in the fields, what have you, because you have to be proven to be a comrade, even though you could make intellectual contributions that would benefit society far, far more than having somebody, a true intellectual, say a scientist, say an engineer, et cetera, building real things that benefit people, doctors. I don't know about lawyers so much, but anyhow, that's just a joke, a little aside. But those people, instead, their labor, their intellectual labor, is being lost. So China went on the wrong course. They corrected it, though. And I think the reason that they corrected it is something embedded in their culture that goes far, far back before anybody even heard of communism. It's called the mandate of heaven. That is, the rulers must have the mandate of heaven. They must have, or they lose face. If you lose face, you don't have the mandate of heaven, you can't rule. So they're interesting. I've been writing recently a little bit about China. You see a post that I made in my sister Thingamabob column of the paradox of China. Because what did they do? They took not just the cheap labor, and said we're going to get money for it. What they did was they said we're going to ourselves progress. We're going to build industry. We're going to build high-speed rails, maglev trains that can go what is it, 400 miles an hour? Do we have any of those? In the good old U.S. of A. that has shut down factory after factory. The only things we've been producing recently, frankly, is stadiums all around, everywhere. Entertainment. We're producing a lot in Hollywood, a lot of these, films and so forth. That's something, isn't it? I don't know who it benefits besides the people that produce them. Not too many people. The reason it could, I'm not saying that videos themselves are a bad thing, but the most of them are pretty bad in terms of any real contribution to humanity. And that gets me to my next point. What I just wrote, I'm just going to read through this. And it's called The Only Way Out. And it says, the rather Hobbesian doctrine of geopolitics must be defeated if humanity can have an opportunity to prevail. And what I mean by prevail is not just to exist. Humanity will merely exist. What I mean is that humanity will accelerate development of a kind, which I'm going to go through in just a few moments. While this has always mattered in stopping senseless slaughter, that is rejecting the Hobbesian doctrine, today more than ever, with the advent of the H-bomb arsenals, it is a necessary turn that must be taken. That is the complete abnegation of geopolitics, which was what the Hobbesian doctrine is. It's geopolitics. We're all evil. We got to fight each other. Somebody's got to win. Somebody must win. We must have war. More war. A war here, a war there. A jolly little war. I don't know who said that in the British hierarchy. Some noble talked about, was it Churchill? Might have been. Jolly little wars. Okay. So the common aim, this gets my next sentence here. The common aims of mankind to quell the warrior class doing the bidding of heedless financiers' lunatic monetary schemes of bubble economics. The rules-based order says we have to pay the debt. That is sacrosanct, the debt. The common aims of mankind are as follows. Development of fusion energy, which is on the logo of my site, and something that I have promoted personally for ever since I was cognizant of Way Out, which is many years now. Still, the Way Out still works. That hasn't changed. People pursuing that, though, unfortunately, have gotten sidetracked in many, many ways into things that are not of the essence. And that, by the way, that essence is not stopping by merely presenting a program and saying X, Y, Z. Because it's X, Y, Z might change. One thing we know, going back to Heraclitus, for certain, is that change itself is the essence of universal processes. at all levels of reality, change. You can look at it in terms of change in the physical astronomical universe, or the infinitesimal universe of biophysics, of proteinomics, or most importantly, change in human creativity. The problem with that human creativity, as it's represented, for example, in great art, is that the heights, the zenith of various forms of art, poetry, music, have never been surpassed from the standpoint of the presenting the beautiful than really over a century now. Maybe nearly 2 centuries. When did Beethoven write? And if anybody will say to you, oh no, there's been many people beyond Beethoven. There are people who cherished Beethoven, like Brahms, for example, and sought to bring their own personality into what Beethoven, the development that Beethoven fostered. However, if you look at the period of his late works, in particular the late string quartets, which are the most advanced music in my way of thinking, which I think is, it's very hard for anybody to argue against this, but of course they will. But in terms of advancement of musical science, musical truth, art from the standpoint of art as science, which is what it is. Beethoven's late string quartet, in particular, one in particular, which is his Grosse Fuge. The Grosse Fuge is a mathematical genius proposition. It's a scientific, truthful proposition. What is the proposition? I've written about this. It's on my blog as well. I don't have it right in front of me right now. However, I don't need it in front of me to parlay this. If you take a problem that Bernard Riemann introduced of an apparent arbitrary mathematical function, and you attempt to rein it in by using tools to, let's take his prime number, the way that he addressed prime numbers. What he said is that there has to be some confining function for how they are generated. There has to be. It's necessary. He said, I can only present some sort of method of approximation of it, but I don't have the answer. But I can tell you there must be a geometric corollary that is, in fact, from the standpoint of the essence of mathematics itself, is congruent with this taming the arbitrary function of prime numbers. There must be some geometrical basis for it, and you can read his works and you can see what. I'm not going to go into that right now. But back to Beethoven. If you look at the Grosse Fuge and you see that what starts out as seemingly arbitrary kind of if you think of it in terms of a tune, of a line of music, an arbitrary tune that is just presented in a very confronting, shocking way. There's nothing you can tap your toes to. It's not a sing-along. It's apparently even irrational to start out because it doesn't compute with the rules of melodic refinement, something that Beethoven himself always played on, goofing, making fun of, and humorous variations and so forth of stuff that really was just simple harmonies or ditties, simple ditties, and he elevated them by ironic juxtaposition and development of things that could come out of them. And that's the important point. Development of a higher order of simple idea, showing how it can be universalized in great music. Okay, so he did that throughout his whole career. That's something he just did. It's the essence of his symphonies. It's the essence of all of his instrumental music. And the fact that Ninth Symphony is Schiller's Ode to Joy, it's of a piece. It's part and parcel of what we're talking about, what my blog is about, what my videos are about. The way out, universal humanity. So what did he do with this Grosser Fugue? To go back to that for a moment, he took an arbitrary melody, if you want to call it that, and he showed step by step a development that ends with that same melody, but now is presented in a way that it totally makes sense. It didn't on first hearing, but now you hear it again. And you hear it because you have followed a method of elevating music, art, and thereby elevating humanity. The old nostrum of Keats is true. Truth is beauty. Beauty is truth. So, I mean, you can. I would urge you to listen to the Grosser Fugue from that standpoint. That I just. It's very easy. I mean, you're on the internet, which means you can access right now this same YouTube channel, the Grosser Fugue, and I would suggest that you do that. And I put that on my my blog site all the time. But at the Quartetto Italiano in particular, have a wonderful rendering of the Grosser Fugue. It's tremendous. So anyhow, to go back to where we were before, the following program is very simple. It's not hard to understand whatsoever. It's hard to accept that this must be the way. And by the way, harkening back to Beethoven, his work, It Must Be, is one of those late string quartets. It must be. So the development of fusion energy. And right now, as I've pointed out in previous videos, I worked for many, 20 years in airports around the country promoting fusion energy. And in other places, fusion energy is part of it. Kind of promoting these ideas that, like I said before, they haven't gone out of style. They're something that are worthy of pulling humanity from the abyss, the brink. So fusion energy, transportation infrastructure. Again, easy. What did you do? We're transporting people and goods in the most efficient way possible. Look at China again with the maglev trains. I mean, you can do the same thing with canals, build new ones. That is part of it. Transporting things in the future, if you think about space, which is part of this, how outer space could get engaged in manufacturing products that we don't want to mine here, for example, on the Earth. Mine them in outer space and process them through, again, fusion energy. Because fusion energy is not just a source for energy, it's a MHD, magnetohydrodynamic revolution, potentially, which means that we can take raw materials, the crust of the Earth, and refine everything out of it, or the crust of meteorites, the crust of comets, all that stuff, that great stuff that's out there in space for us to take advantage of. And that's the other thing, settling outer space, settling humans. Now, you're hearing, if you're following the news or the research recently that's been out, you'll hear more and more about the unsettling effects of low gravity, for example. We have to solve those problems, and radiation shields. We can provide the equivalent inertial field and electromagnetic protection to solve those problems. We can have rotating space platforms. We can have whole, what are called planetoids by Croft Erica, who I'm glad to have conversed with. So we have to do that. That's common aims of humanity. Common aims. We can agree on that. China's doing it, aren't they? Russia's been involved in space. A lot of other countries are getting involved in it. Even, Oman? Certainly the French and the Germans and the British. Even the Rolls-Royce are trying to create some nuclear engines or also small nuclear reactors to be used to power settlements on the moon, for example. There's tremendous, wonderful ideas out there of how we can do that. One is rotational habitation, which will provide gravity. It's out there. It's out there. This stuff is out there. The problem is, what do we know? We know entertainment. We know Space Odyssey or Star Wars. And nothing to do with the really exciting future potential that is waiting for humanity. That's worth, as Musk rightly says, to get up and be inspired by. I don't know if I'd be inspired by having a cage match with Facebook. The CEO of Facebook, Zuckerberg. That wouldn't inspire me. Maybe Musk has his problems. One of his problems is fusion. His big rival. These always. Who knows if they're really rivals anyway? Right? They say they do this, that, and the other thing. Bill Gates is financing fusion, and for all you conspirophiles that say his foundations are out there to reduce the population. All kinds of stuff that he's doing. It's the whole vaccination program, right? As though Benjamin Franklin didn't change his mind about smallpox vaccinations. He did. He was first against it. The same Franklin that gave us really workable models for electrostatics and things like the lightning rod to protect our domiciles here on Earth, let alone the domiciles out there in space, which has a whole different issues to protect. That's the advent of technology. That's why space itself, space science, is so integral into a beneficial future for humanity. Okay, so another point, freshwater projects. Again, go back to this issue of refining resources. We have, with that plasma economy of millions of degrees of heat, the freshwater supplies that are virtually non-ending, as though water comets are coming in to us, and we're just able to capture that. And we will be able to capture that in the future. That's what a space economy is about. So there's an unlimited supply of everything. There are no limits to growth. The limits to growth are up here. The realm of human creative mentation. That's the only place where there are limits to growth. What we can imagine and put into implementation to benefit humanity. So, increasing the health span, not just the lifespan. Here I am, I just turned 70. The average lifespan these days in the U.S. has been going down. I think it's 75. I mean, it's been going down. There's a few places in the world which still have a long lifespan, but the U.S. is way down on the list, which it shouldn't be, given the fact that what our aspirations were. That's for sure. So that freshwater projects, increasing the health span, settling space, fusion energy. Isn't that the basis for real diplomacy on this planet, to put an end to geopolitics? I've gone on for a little bit at length here and pretty much got across what I wanted to get across. So I'm going to click the little video ending this one. Thanks for listening, and if you like what I have to say, tell your friends, press the like buttons. I just want to get the message out, and engage the ideas so that you can efficiently transmit those ideas yourself. Thanks again. Have a good evening.